Hello class, I'm Jeffrey Rima and this is AVIA 326 video presentation on 8-zone pylons. I chose this because I've been having the most difficulty with this maneuver during my commercial flight maneuvers, and I was hoping to maybe learn something and maybe be able to spread some information to you guys that might help you as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into 8-zone pylons. 8-zone pylons is a term around two adjacent points in opposite directions. Unlike other ground reference maneuvers, which require the pilot to correct for wind drift by using varying bank angles and crabbing techniques, 8-zone pylons require the pilot to maintain lateral orientation to an object on the ground by either ascending or descending based on ground speed. The purpose of 8-zone pylons is to help develop intuitive control of the aircraft and to instill proper coordination techniques, which are both essential to completing the maneuver. First, it's a good idea to establish your pivotal altitude. Pivotal altitude is going to be essential for ensuring that you can make your turns around these 2 points and have that correct sight picture orientation to the objects on the ground. So after selecting 2 pylons or ground reference points, it's essential to establish a correct pivotal altitude. This is achieved by squaring your ground speed, then dividing by 11.3. So if your ground speed is 100, you're going to multiply 100 times 100, and then you're going to divide that by 11.3. And that's going to give you your pivotal altitude. So that right here we can see we take 100, multiply it by 100. That equals obviously 10,000. We're going to take that, divide by 11.3, and achieve our pivotal altitude of 884. Okay? So your pivotal altitude is going to be 884 AGL. So to accommodate for your pylon being on mean sea level and your altimeter at mean sea level, all you have to do is figure out the mean sea level altitude of your object. Let's just say this is 900 feet and your object is 200 feet off the ground. So you're going to add 200 feet to 900 feet, you're going to get 1100 feet. So after you establish your pivotal altitude, this is kind of a description of what happens. When you're on your correct pivotal altitude, you're going to be able to turn around this reference point while keeping that pylon directly underneath the reference point, which is going to be somewhere on your wing right here. If you're too high, you're obviously going to be outside of your reference point here. Inside. If you're too low, I was correct the first time. You're going to be outside your reference point. If you're too low, you're going to be inside of your reference point as you make your circle around. And your reference point is never really going to be on the pylon. So the setup, to begin the maneuver, the pilot should fly diagonal to the downwind in between the 2 selected pylons. The pilot should ensure the aircraft is trained for straight and level flight and that the aircraft is at or below the maneuvering speed. As the pilot or below the maneuvering speed. As the first pylon is abeam the lateral axis of the aircraft, the pilot should start the first turn, which would be into the wind. My apologies. Which would be into the wind. As the aircraft turns into the wind, the ground speed will be the lowest. So as the ground speed reduces, so is your altitude. This is because, again, that pivotal altitude is going to change with your ground speed. So you're going to want to slowly and methodically reduce your altitude with your ground speed. As the turn progresses, the wind will become a crosswind and the ground speed will start to increase. This will require the aircraft to climb in altitude, eventually reaching its original entry altitude. As the aircraft exits the first turn, the aircraft is going to roll wing level until the second pylon is being the opposite lateral axis. Once the second pylon is beam the lateral axis, the aircraft is going to again roll into a turn, this time to the right, around the second pylon. Again, as the aircraft is turned upwind, the ground speed is going to start to bleed off, requiring a lower pivotal altitude. Once the aircraft continues to turn back to a crosswind, the ground speed is going to start to pick back up, which is going to require you to increase your altitude. This is a diagram showing the Airplane Flying Handbook. Gives you this diagram. It shows your entry. You're going to enter at an angle to the downwind. Obviously, the wind's coming from the north. As you start your first turn, you're going to be at the highest pivotal altitude. You're going to start your descent as you start turning into that headwind. And then you're going to start to gain altitude. As you go into the crosswind, you're going to be back to your original. You're going to come back around. Again, starting your descent as you go into the headwind. Starting your ascent as you go into the crosswind. And then you're going to come back to your original altitude so you can continue the maneuver if you choose to do so. ACS standards, obviously you have to clear the area. I found the best way to do this to be to fly upwind away from your two pylons, and then you can do a 180-degree clearing turn back into the two pylons as you reduce an elevation back down to your pivotal altitude. Then you can start your trim and make your calculations based on ground speed. So you're going to determine the approximate pivotal altitude, and that's going to be necessary. You're going to select two suitable pylons that permit straight and level flight between the pylons. The Airplane Flying Handbook says should be no more than 3 to 5 seconds straight and level flight in between the two pylons. You're going to enter the maneuver in the correct direction and position using the appropriate altitude and airspeed. Obviously, you want to be below maneuvering speed as you're turning the aircraft. Establish the correct bank angle for conditions not to exceed 40 degrees. Apply smooth and continuous corrections so that the line of sight reference line remains on the pylon. Obviously, being a commercial pilot requires you to be smooth. It's going to require you to divide attention between accurate and coordinated airplane control and outside visual references, and maintain pylon positioning using appropriate pivotal altitude, avoiding slips and skids. Obviously, any types of slips and skids are going to be disqualifying. The goal is here to have smooth and coordinated flight. Thank you for watching my video.